I declare the third part session of the 2022 ordinary session of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe open. Please take your seats, dear colleagues. Madam Secretary General, Madam Secretary General of the Assembly, ambassadors, members of the Assembly, guests on the gallery, welcome and thanks to all of you who have joined us in Strasbourg for the first session since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemics, held in an in-person format. I'm very pleased. We are all moving back to normal practices, which we all missed in the past 2 years. However, let us never forget that this deadly pandemic took the lives of 2 million of our European citizens. Their relatives and friends deserve our sincere condolences. And let us be aware that we still are not sure whether it has ended yet. Let us therefore stay vigilant. Dear colleagues, I wish to extend my special welcome to the members of the Ukrainian delegation, who are today here with us despite the challenging time Ukraine lives through. I also welcome those Ukrainian Assembly members who stayed back home and are connected with us to this meeting remotely. Dear colleagues, while we meet here in sunny and peaceful Strasbourg, we should never forget that at this very moment there is a brutal war going on nearby in which people die, get injured, are maltreated, are chased away from their homes and even from their country every day. This horrible war should never become a normality for us. We should defy any temptation to get used to it. Instead, we should continue to do our utmost to help to end the suffering of the Ukrainian people and continue to demonstrate our solidarity in all effective and meaningful manners. I once again call on the Russian authorities, the President, the government, the Parliament, and on all Russian citizens to immediately end this war of aggression against our member state of Ukraine. There is not a single reason to continue this war, which should never have been started. Therefore, I now wish to invite, for again, a moment of silence for all these big numbers of victims of this war at our continent. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Chers collègues, lors de notre session d'avril, nombre d'entre vous ont demandé au sujet de la guerre en Ukraine une implication et une solidarité continue de notre organisation. Je tiens à remercier la secrétaire générale et la commissaire aux droits de l'homme du Conseil de l'Europe pour tous les efforts qu'elles ont déployés à cet égard et pour leur visite d'information en Ukraine. Je salue également la décision d'envoyer dans un bref délai une sous-commission de la Commission des questions juridiques en Ukraine. Les préparatifs sont en cours. Je voudrais souligner que notre solidarité et notre soutien concret envers les citoyens et l'État ukrainien doivent s'accompagner d'une réflexion approfondie sur comment cette guerre est devenue possible, sur ce que nous n'avons pas fait pour l'empêcher et sur la manière dont nous pouvons non seulement l'arrêter, mais aussi prendre les mesures nécessaires pour éviter les guerres sur notre continent dans l'avenir. Je pense qu'il sera juste de dire que le système multilatéral que nous avons en Europe n'a pas réussi à empêcher la guerre d'agression contre l'Ukraine. Il existe de nombreuses organisations dont le but ultime était de prévenir la guerre et de préserver la paix sur le continent. L'ONU, l'OSCE, l'OTAN, l'Union européenne et bien sûr le Conseil de l'Europe. Mais toutes ont collectivement échoué dans cet objectif. Nous devons maintenant nous demander ce qui n'a pas fonctionné et comment renforcer notre architecture multilatérale et la reconstruire de manière efficace et durable. Dear colleagues, clearly we now have a unique momentum to reconstruct and to improve this architecture. Rephrasing the words of the Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi said during his visit to Ukraine last week, together with the presidents of France and Romania and the Chancellor of Germany, we are living in the times of destruction, but also of hope. The war united people in Europe, and we can now do what seemed impossible before that war. The way we reacted on Russia's blatant violation of its obligations immediately, decisively, and in exemplary synergy is an example of this. Last week, the European Commission delivered its proposal on applications for candidature status by Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. This week, the leaders of governments of EU member states will take their decision, which has then to be approved by all EU member states. Whatever the decision, it is clear that eventual accession to these and other states to the EU will take a long period. And whatever the decision the EU takes, the Council of Europe, as a continent's oldest and broadest treaty organization, will remain most relevant and be part of an effective, sustainable, and modern answer to the challenging questions of today and tomorrow with its 46 member states. I welcome the decision of the Council of Europe's ministerial meeting in Turin in May, where I had the honor to represent the Assembly, to express unanimous support to the proposal of the Secretary General on the quick organization of the 4th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Council of Europe member states, the first summit since 2005, 17 years ago. I understand, Madam Secretary General, that the work to prepare the summit is already underway and that the Secretary General has composed a special reflection group of wise persons. We will hear more about this, I assume, from the Secretary General and from the Chair of the Committee of Ministers during the week. Dear colleagues, I believe that our Assembly, as political engine of this organization, should and could play its own role in this process. You will recall that the Assembly expressed its strong support to the organization of a summit already several years ago. We also formulated clearly our vision on the Council of Europe, which has to remain the pillar of democratic security in Europe, the guarantor of human rights and the rule of law, a platform of genuine multilateralism, and an independent forum of comprehensive and inclusive political dialogue. The Assembly's report on the 4th Summit is now under preparation in the Political Affairs Committee. And during this session, we will already examine the report on recent challenges to security in Europe, what role for the Council of Europe, which will be followed by a high-level panel on upholding democratic security in Europe. In this panel, the foreign ministers from Ireland and Finland will participate alongside with the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, as well as the leader of the Belarus opposition, Madam Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. You are very warmly invited to participate in this panel discussion tomorrow. Besides these debates, there will be many more subjects to be debated this week, including ensuring accountability for the downing of MH17 flight, a joint debate on the humanitarian consequences and internal and external migration in connection with the aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, alternative care for unaccompanied and separated children, and justice and security for women in peace reconciliation. A report on preventing anti-Semitism in Europe, and a report on the role of political parties in fostering diversity and inclusion, and a joint debate on the continuing need to restore human rights and the rule of law in North Caucasus region and political prisoners in the Russian Federation. We will welcome several guests, including the King of the Netherlands, Willem-Alexander, and the President of the Hellenic Republic, Madam Katerina Sakalaropoulou. Finally, we will now return to usual practices from the time before the COVID-19 pandemics. I'm happy to announce that side events will also be held during the session. Furthermore, 2 exhibitions will be open today and tomorrow in the lobby of the Hemicycle. One exhibition called Listen by the Sarajevo War Childhood Museum is organized by the Office of the Council of Europe's Commissioner for Human Rights. It will present personal belongings and stories of children from Ukraine, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo, as well as experiences of child refugees from Afghanistan and Syria, with a view to improving our understanding of children's experiences in armed conflicts. The second exhibition by the Ukrainian delegation will focus on dangerous, courageous and important work of journalists during the war in Ukraine. Chers collègues, je compte sur votre participation active pour les débats de cette semaine de session, dont l'agenda est chargé mais également important et intéressant. Et je vous invite à vous mettre à la tâche dès à présent, sachant que nous pouvons toutes et tous compter pour ce faire sur le soutien engagé des membres du personnel, de nos interprètes ainsi que de toutes les autres personnes qui rendent notre vie plus facile et notre travail réalisable. Je vous remercie de votre attention. Then, the first item on the agenda is the examination of credentials of new members. The names of the representatives and substitutes are in document 15551. If no credentials are challenged, the credentials will be ratified. As I see no objection, they are ratified. I welcome our new colleagues. Next item on our agenda is the election of vice presidents of the Assembly in respect of Malta and Portugal. The two candidates are from the Maltese delegation, Madam Kasia, and from the Portuguese delegation, Madam Estrella. If there is no request for a vote, and I don't see, Madam Kasia and Madam Estrella will be declared elected, and I congratulate them. Our next business is to consider the changes proposed in the membership of committees. They are set out in document Commission's 2022-06 and addendum. Are the proposed changes in the membership of the Assembly's committees agreed to? Do not see any objections, so they are agreed to. Dear colleagues, before we examine the draft agenda, the Assembly needs to consider a request for debates on the current affairs procedures. I remind the Assembly that under Resolution 2350, the Assembly may now hold up to 2 current affairs debates in a part session. The Bureau has received the following: a request for a current affairs debate on the consequences of the blockade of the Black Sea, requested by the ECDA political group. A second request for a current affairs debate on United Kingdom agreement on asylum seekers and the critical government reaction regarding the ECHR decision, requested by the Socialist political group. And a third request for a current affairs debate on Turkey's aggressive behavior and the threat of revisionism for European stability, requested by the EPP-CD political group. We now come to a request for a current affairs debate on the consequences on the blockade of the Black Sea. At its meeting this morning, the Bureau agreed to recommend to the Assembly that this request be rejected. Does the Assembly agree to this recommendation? Mr. Littlegranger.
Mr. President, thank you very much indeed. I'd like to bring this back onto the floor of the plenary session, please, Mr. President. I think this is such an important debate, which is putting people's lives at risk, that we cannot get food out. It's affecting Africa, it's affecting Europe. The UN has made it very clear this is a humanitarian disaster in the making. There are 700 ships off Odessa at the moment waiting to get food out. We can't do it. This organization should be ahead of the curve, Mr. President. It should not be behind the curve. And it perturbs me when large countries here feel that this is not important. I would urge you, Mr. President, to bring this back so we can vote on it in the plenary session to allow people to justify why they don't think that food security across the world is important.
Thank you very much, Mr. Littlegranger. As I informed you, the Bureau is against. The Assembly will now vote on the Bureau's recommendation not to hold a current affairs debate on consequences of the blockade of the Black Sea. I remind the Assembly that the decision requires a simple majority. Those who agree with the proposal of the Bureau not to hold a current affairs debate on this topic should vote yes. Those who are opposed to the Bureau's recommendation should vote no. The vote is open now. The vote is now closed. I call for the results to be displayed. It's actually there are 39 votes to support the proposal of the Bureau. There are 46 to oppose the proposal of the Bureau. There are 9 abstentions. That means that this current affairs debate will take place. A point of order, Mr. Schwabe.
First, I understand that you need a two-thirds majority to change the decision of the Bureau. Second, there was no possibility to speak against, no? It is not foreseen to have a... the problem is just that I think we have to explain before we decide on something why we vote in this direction. No? At the end, we can have maybe 20 current affairs debates, but this would mean that we don't have space for the usual debates. And I think the colleagues are not aware of it. This was the reason. I'm not against this discussion, but at the end, we have to choose a limitation, or we have to limit our discussion. This is the reason. So I would like to know that you clarify this.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Schwab. I did inform the Assembly that we can have a maximum of 2 current affairs debate, and that there were 3 proposals. So that is, the Assembly was informed about that. I did inform the Assembly that the Bureau advised not to hold a current affairs debate on this issue. Mr. Little-Granger spoke against that decision of the Bureau, and then I put it to the vote, and the result is now that the majority, a simple majority is required to change the decision of the Bureau. The simple majority is acquired. There are 46 people opposing the decision of the Bureau, so we have to hold the current affairs debate. These are the rules, and this is my interpretation of the rules. I now come to the second request, and again, we have 3 requests, and we have only only the possibility to accommodate maximum 2. The first request, and now we come to the request for a current affairs debate on the United Kingdom agreement on asylum seekers and the critical government reaction regarding the ECHR decision. At the meeting this morning, the Bureau approved this request and therefore recommends to the Assembly that the matter be debated during this past session. Does the Assembly agree to this recommendation?
Mr. Howell.
I first give for a point of order Mr. Schwab the floor, and then I give Mr. Howell the floor to speak against the proposal of the Bureau. Mr. Schwab.
A point of order. I just want to argue in favor. I think we have to elaborate this rule procedure in the Presidential Committee, because I think it's not clear for everybody what is the situation. Let's imagine we would have 4 or 5 proposals. What does it mean? We vote in favor of the first 2, and nobody is aware that the last 3 are falling. So we really have to check it. But I, for sure, would like to speak in favor to have the current affairs debate on the agreement on asylum seekers between UK, United Kingdom, and Rwanda, and for sure the criticism from the British government, and it was not a private position, it was the Minister of Interior who criticized it and speak about a scandalous decision by the court, and I think we cannot accept it, so I ask you to follow the decision of the Bureau.
Thank you very much. I said the Bureau was in favor, is in favor to hold this debate. Mr. Howell wants to oppose the proposal of the Bureau. Mr. Howell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I object to current affairs debate number 2. Politicians come and go. Some say silly things. But there has been no reaction from the UK government over this matter. And what has happened is that the ECHR ruling has been accepted and we have moved on. This is a non-story and a non-debate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howell. We now will proceed to vote on the proposal of the Bureau to hold a current affairs debate on the United Kingdom agreement on asylum seekers and the critical government reaction regarding the ECHR decision. If you support the decision of the Bureau, you vote yes. If you oppose the decision of the Bureau, you vote no. The vote is open. The vote is closed. May I ask the results to be displayed? The proposal of the Bureau to hold this current affairs debate is adopted. That means, as the Assembly now has agreed to hold 2 current affairs debates in the part session, no further request will be considered. I have to say that Mr. Schwab is proposed to introduce the second current affairs debate. There has to be a proposal for the first current affairs debate. Can I propose that Mr. Little Granger or Mr. Howell introduces?
We're getting a name now, Mr. President, and I'll pass it to the table office in 30 seconds, if I may. I'll confirm who it is with you, Mr. President, as well.
I think we can accept 30 seconds delay. So these 2 debates will take place, and we will hear later from our Secretary General of the Assembly how we are going to organize that. Let's see. No, we are 4. Next item of business is the adoption of the agenda for the 3rd part session of our 2022 ordinary session. You find it in document 15522, provisional. The draft agenda submitted for the Assembly's approval was brought up to date by the Bureau this morning. I remind members that we have just agreed the current affairs debate set out in the draft before you. The current affairs debate will take in this afternoon, but I leave it to the Secretary General to tell us when it will take place. Madam Secretary General.
Well, Mr. President, as we have now changed the decision of the Bureau, I think we will leave the slots as they were agreed. So we will have I would suggest that we have, as we agreed, the first current affairs debate as it is on the agenda, and instead of the second current affairs debate, on the aggressive behavior of Turkey. We take the current affairs debate that was approved just now about the blockade of the Black Sea. So
Okay.
we change in this way, at minimum, the decision, the agenda approved by the Bureau.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary General. Can the agenda now be agreed? That is the case. And I just was informed that Mr. Goncharenko will open the current affairs debate on the blockade. Then we have the minutes of the meeting of the Standing Committee in Dublin on the 31st of May. They have been distributed. I invite the Assembly to take note of these minutes. No objection. The next item on the debate on the agenda is debate on the progress report of the Bureau and the Standing Committee. You find it in document 15550 and addendum 1 and 2, presented by Mr. Alexander Pojce. Alexander, where are you? This will be combined with the consideration of the report. Can I ask you, Alexander, to come in front of the hemicycle to present it here? This progress report will be combined with the consideration of the report of the ad hoc committee of the Bureau on the observation of the presidential and early parliamentary elections in Serbia, also presented by Mr. Alexander Pojce. The debate must conclude by 1 p.m. I will therefore interrupt the list of speakers at around 12:50. I remind members that speaking time is 3 minutes. I now call Mr. Pojce to present the progress report of the Bureau and the Standing Committee, and also to present the report of the ad hoc committee of the Bureau on the observation of the presidential and early elections in Serbia. Mr. Pojce, dear Alexander, you have 10 minutes in total to present the report, and we'll have 5 minutes to reply to the debate. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear colleagues. I'm very pleased to present to you the latest progress report of the Bureau and the Standing Committee of our Assembly, covering the period from April to June 2022. During the reporting period, our Assembly has, of course, decided to pursue its discussion of the consequences of the Russian Federation's continued aggression against Ukraine by seizing our Committee on Political Affairs to prepare a report on the political consequences of Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine. The agenda of our current part session this week is also highly relevant, not least of our high-level panel on upholding democratic security in Europe, as well as the debate on recent challenges to security in Europe. What role for the Council of Europe? For very obvious reasons, this remains on top of our agenda. The Standing Committee in Dublin held a current affairs debate towards a fourth summit for a renewed, improved and reinforced Council of Europe, the way forward. Assembly members expressed their strong support for the organization of a fourth Council of Europe summit, which would bring together the heads of state or government of all member states to renew, improve and reinforce the organization at a time of dramatic changes in Europe. Such a summit should be well prepared and would be the opportunity to undertake broad reflection on how to reinforce democratic security on the continent. As at its meeting on 30 May and in anticipation to the actual debate by the Standing Committee, the Bureau already seized the Committee on Political Affairs and Democracy to prepare a report on fourth summit for a renewed, improved and reinforced Council of Europe. Assembly and the Committee of Ministers representatives are discussing and will continue to discuss the follow-up to the ministerial session in Turin. The idea of fourth summit will be part of our discussion. Let me recall that our Assembly has long been in favor of this organization of this fourth summit. Now seems more than ever the right time to do so. During the reporting period, the Bureau also examined some of the additional working methods brought about in 2020 by the COVID-19 pandemic as alternative to ordinary procedures. As a matter of fact, procedures and practices applied during the last 2 years have led to a modernization of the Assembly's functioning and, in many respects, to improvements. Some of those procedures had already been called by the members before the pandemic. The Bureau decided to introduce on a permanent basis those arrangements which bring an added value to the Assembly's procedures. The Committee of Rules of Procedure, Immunity and Institutional Affairs has been seized to examine possible amendments to the rules of procedure of the Assembly. The Bureau also took note of 2 new initiatives of our Assembly committees: a network of contact parliamentarians for a healthy environment, which is chaired by our former president of the Assembly, Rick Dams, and a parliamentary platform for the rights of LGBT people in Europe, chaired by our general rapporteur on the rights of LGBT people, both will launch their activities this week. I could also mention many others activities carried by the Bureau and the Standing Committee, including the election observation in Serbia, but this will come a little bit later. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pojci, for your presentation. I have to tell that Mr. Pojci is being assisted by Madam Isilde Vertain, who is sitting behind Mr. Pojci, and I have to inform the Assembly that Isilde is back on track since the 1st of June, after having given birth to a beautiful son who has enriched her family. So welcome back, Isilde. Now I open the floor. Yes. It should be especially the man who should applaud, because it's not so an easy thing to give birth to a child, Isilde. Now I open the floor for the speakers, and the first on my list is Madam Petra Bayer on behalf of the group of the Socialists, Democrats and Greens. Petra, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to start there where Alexander ended, at the Serbian election observation, where I would like to share some really concrete concerns with you and share some main points of criticism, 3 of them more general, which is, first of all, the access to media, which is very uneven. And we saw that especially SNS, the party of the president, had a vast majority of time in media, especially TV, which is the main source of information for people. And opposition in general said that they barely had any possibility to give information about their programs, about their ideas, and that was obviously not a very fair competition. And even media failed to play their watchdog function in this regard. Second concern is about the financing of election campaigns. And we know that we have also, due to a long process moderated by the European Union, where also opposition parties were involved, we have new legislation on financing for elections. But obviously, these new regulations failed to meet the goal, because there is still also the new legislation does not provide sufficient safeguard against the misuse of administrative resources during the election campaign. Third, we hear a lot of concerns that there was put a lot of pressure on people who are working for government or public employees, that they were forced to vote for SNS, for the President's Party, and not only that they themselves were put pressure on to vote for them, they also were obliged to bring other voters. The higher in the hierarchy they were, the more voters they had to swear that they bring to vote for the ruling party. And I also would like to share some irregularities through the voting day, which was a lot of family voting, especially women were often had not the possibility to vote on their own in the booths. There were members of the polling ports entering the polling stations alone, or 2 or 3 of them, helping people with the balls. There were pictures taken from ballot papers, we assume to prove that they voted for this or that party and to buy votes in the very end. And what's also of concern is that many voting stations were not accessible for people with disabilities. When you sit in a wheelchair, you rarely had the possibilities to really cast your vote. And also for those voters from Kosovo, which in former elections had the possibility to vote in Kosovo, and then the bullets were brought to Serbia, this time were brought by buses to Serbia to vote there, which caused a huge crowds in front of the polling stations. So to conclude, first of all, early elections shouldn't become the norm, and second, there is obviously the further need for reforms and implementation, and we hope that there will be a very close cooperation with the Venice Commission in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Petra. Next on the list is Mr. Pablo Hispan from Spain, and he speaks on behalf of the EPP-CD group.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Desde mi grupo, desde el Grupo Popular Europeo, lo primero que queremos hacer es apoyar el informe del señor Pocek. También los comentarios que ha hecho la señora Bayer acerca de las elecciones en Serbia, y quisiera hablar especialmente de 3 cuestiones. De la 4ª cumbre de renovación del Consejo de la Asamblea Parlamentaria del Consejo de Europa es especialmente importante. El resto de instituciones europeas están en un proceso similar, lo está haciendo la Unión Europea con la Conferencia sobre el Futuro de Europa, lo está haciendo también la OTAN. Es decir, todas las instituciones europeas se están adecuando en este nuevo tiempo que la invasión de Ucrania es el elemento catalizador. Esta institución ha tomado decisiones muy importantes durante estos meses. Se expulsó a Rusia, se está en un proceso de revisión de la política y de la influencia de Rusia. Creo que es necesario profundizar en esta cuestión y ver la injerencia de Rusia en muchas de nuestras democracias, de Rusia como elemento desestabilizador, y esta Asamblea pues tiene que actualizarse, tiene que tomar decisiones que en muchos casos ya se venían implementando con ocasión de la crisis del COVID, en la cual ha reaccionado de un modo excelente la Asamblea Parlamentaria, y confiamos desde el Grupo Parlamentario Popular que esta conferencia se lleve adelante y tenga los resultados históricos que merece. Por otro lado, la cuestión referida a la invasión de Ucrania, como he dicho, la Asamblea debe seguir impulsando y tomando medidas de apoyo a esta nación. El futuro de la libertad en Europa se está debatiendo en Ucrania, y es necesario seguir con el proceso de presión política y de apoyo a Ucrania que estamos tomando. Y por otro lado, como ha dicho la señora Bayer, las elecciones en Serbia son un elemento profundamente preocupante para Europa. Que Serbia, que es un país central en los Balcanes, pues no sea una democracia plena, nos afecta y puede tener un elemento desestabilizador no solamente para la región, sino para el conjunto de Europa en un momento crítico de nuestro tiempo. Por tanto, es necesario seguir presionando fuerte, es necesario seguir tomando medidas y estar muy vigilantes sobre el desarrollo de la democracia en Serbia. Muchas gracias. Y, como digo, mi grupo apoya plenamente el informe del señor Pocek.
Thank you very much, Pablo. Now, next on the list is Mr. Ian Littlegranger from the United Kingdom, and he speaks on behalf of the ECDA group. You have the floor, Ian.
Mr. President, thank you. Alec, thank you. I think we've got to look at progress about what we achieve as an organisation. We are now talking about, Mr. President, having a fourth seminar, a fourth conference about the future. But the future can only be set by the lessons of the past. And one of the battles we're fighting now is for the very soul of Europe. At the moment, we have a ghastly situation in the Ukraine. We, as parliamentarians, must stand up against tyranny. We must stand up against non-democratic organisations. We must stand up for the members of this place. And if we want to make progress into the future and have conferences about deciding where we go and what we stand for, we must get our priorities right. And I wonder if they're right, because the whole idea of the Council of Europe is to stand for democracy. But yet, we spend so much of our time just looking at ourselves, writing another report, another boring report that doesn't make any sense, and people ignore. No country takes any notice of this. No country will stand up and say, gosh, that was a good report. We don't get that. Surely the future and the way that we should make progress is by using the very best of what we got, which is us, the parliamentarians, to take forward what matters. I've just spoken, and I'm delighted, and I greatly thank colleagues for supporting the debate on the Black Sea. One of the very fundamental rights we have is for food. It's just the most basic thing you can have. Yet here we are looking at other debates which are not the core business. The core business is for us to defend the people, not just of Europe, of the world. Those are not my words, those are the UN's. But we have a massive role to play. Our legitimacy as an organisation is not in doubt. But I do sometimes fear for the future of our organisation, for what we stand for, makes us really go above other organisations. And that is where I have a worry. And Mr. President, I know you're doing your best with this, and we've not always agreed, but I do agree with you with this, that we need to think where we're going. And we need to make decisions that will take us forward. And I would actually plead with all of you to say this, that we have turned our back in the past, not sometimes on our generation, on former generations. It has always ended badly. If this place is to have relevance in the future, we must never turn our backs. We must stick to what matters, which is the defence of people, the defence of their rights, and the defence of democracy. I support this, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. Prochain orateur est M. Jacques Maire de la France et parle au nom du groupe ADLE. Jacques, vous avez la parole.
Merci, cher Président. Évidemment, merci à Alex Pocek pour son rapport excellent. Le contexte est totalement marqué par l'effroyable agression russe en Ukraine. Et de ce point de vue, il y a beaucoup de sources d'inquiétude, mais il y a aussi une source d'espoir. C'est ce qui a été effectivement décidé il y a quelques jours par la Commission européenne quand elle a proposé le statut de candidat pour l'Ukraine, pour la Géorgie demain et pour la Moldavie. Je crois que dans ce contexte, ce n'est pas notre institution, mais nous devons nous réjouir de cette évolution. Et nous devons nous réjouir aussi quand 4 responsables, 4 leaders importants, le français, l'allemand, l'italien et le roumain, viennent sur place à Kiev confirmer cet engagement auprès du président Zelensky lui-même. C'est d'autant plus important que sur le front, la situation est mauvaise, sur le plan migratoire, sur le plan humanitaire, des choses effroyables se passent. Et en Russie aussi. Et je crois que ce n'est pas parce que la Russie n'est plus membre de cette Assemblée qu'il ne faut pas évoquer la situation en Russie. Et de ce point de vue, les législations adoptées par le président Poutine depuis quelques semaines produisent tous leurs effets dramatiques, y compris quand il s'agit d'inculper les gens pour cause de critiques en direction des forces armées russes. Aujourd'hui, 15 000 personnes sont emprisonnées. Aujourd'hui, près de 3 000 procédures administratives sont engagées. 58 procédures pénales sont elles-mêmes, je dirais, instruites contre des personnes qui n'ont pas fait autre chose que de dire finalement la vérité, à savoir qu'il y a une guerre menée par la Russie en Ukraine. Donc ne les oublions pas. Moi je suis très, très heureux d'avoir aujourd'hui parmi nous également la femme de Vladimir Kara-Murza, qui n'est pas uniquement un juriste, un défendeur des droits de l'homme, mais aussi un homme politique. Et par rapport à cela, un des défis que nous aurons à traiter dans les mois qui viennent concernant notre sommet, c'est le fait de savoir comment nous pouvons évidemment aider les États victimes, mais comment nous pouvons aussi rester pertinents par rapport à ces populations dont les États ne jouent plus le jeu avec nous au sein du Conseil de l'Europe, mais dont de nombreux acteurs politiques, associatifs, institutionnels ou autres souhaitent malgré tout utiliser à nouveau la plateforme du Conseil de l'Europe comme un instrument de défense de leurs droits. C'est un des grands défis que nous aurons à relever. Et j'espère que pour ce faire, notre Assemblée sera au rendez-vous. Merci.
Merci à vous, cher Jacques. Next on my list is Mr. Andrei Juncko from Germany, and he speaks on behalf of the UEL group. Andrei, you have the floor.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Der Fortschrittsbericht bietet ja immer die Möglichkeit, etwas zu reflektieren, zu überlegen, in welcher Situation wir sind. Und wenn wir jetzt zurückblicken auf die letzten Monate und nach vorne schauen, dann ist natürlich in der Tat dieser furchtbare Krieg in der Ukraine, der Ausstieg Russlands oder eigentlich dem Ausschluss vorangegangene Ausstieg Russlands aus dem Europarat und jetzt auch aus dem Gerichtshof, natürlich insgesamt ein ganz schwerer Rückschlag, muss man sagen. Kein Fortschritt, sondern ein Rückschlag. 140, 150 Millionen Menschen sind nicht mehr unter der Jurisdiktion der Europäischen Menschenrechtskonvention. Und das ist natürlich ein großes Problem, obwohl wir als Versammlung und insgesamt der Europarat, glaube ich, sehr schnell und sehr klar reagiert haben. Und es führt natürlich dazu, dass es auch in anderen Bereichen der Menschenrechtskonvention, dass es auch Probleme gibt, die man dann vielleicht auch nicht mehr so wahrnimmt, weil natürlich man schaut jetzt vor allen Dingen auf diesen Krieg, aber ich denke daran, dass das Urteil zum Beispiel im Fall Kavala immer noch nicht umgesetzt worden ist. Auch es gibt keine Fortschritte beim Urteil von Demirtas. Wir haben übrigens immer noch nicht den Beitritt der Europäischen Union zur Menschenrechtskonvention und wir haben auch diese Äußerungen, die jetzt zu der Current Affairs Debatte führen aus Großbritannien. Das sind alles schwierige Entwicklungen und deswegen ist es gut und unterstützt die Linksfraktion, dass es einen vierten Gipfel des Europarates gibt, den vierten erst in der Geschichte seit 1949, weil ich glaube, dass es die Zeit ist, sich da neu aufzustellen, neu zu formieren in dieser veränderten Lage. Der Fortschrittsbericht, wir schauen noch zurück auf die Wahlen, die stattgefunden haben. Wir waren in Serbien. Einiges ist gesagt worden, auch an Schwierigkeiten. Ich will auch ein paar positive Sachen sagen, das muss man, glaube ich, auch erwähnen. Die Blockade ist immerhin überwunden in Serbien. Es gab ja vorher eine Nichtbeteiligung der Opposition. Aber natürlich ist auch das, was in dem Bericht zu den Wahlen geschrieben ist, teilen wir. Eine kurze Anmerkung. Ich war selbst Mitglied der Vorwahldelegation und auch am Wahltag da. Aus irgendeinem Grund bin ich aus der Liste rausgerutscht. Da bitte ich das Sekretariat, das zu korrigieren. Da steht im Augenblick kein Name für die Linksfraktion. Das ist natürlich falsch. Und vielen Dank für die Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you very much. We will check, Andrei, your remark. This concludes the contributions on behalf of the political groups. We did forget in the presentation by Alexander to also address the election observation, because you did both. You are our rapporteur on the progress report, but also on the observation of the presidential election. So I give you 3 minutes, Alexander, to address the elections in Serbia, so that if others want to react, and then at the end you will have your time to react on both issues. You have the floor, Alexander.
Yes, thank you indeed. I didn't know that I should do both in the same time. Yes, our delegation was composed by 25 persons. We, as usual, cooperated with ODIHR, OSCE, and European Parliament mission. Once again, I have to express our gratitude to the members of Venice Commission. Always they are very useful, they are helpful, and they are providing us many very good observations. Indeed, that we did not observe as the Assembly only one election in Serbia, 2020, COVID situation. And indeed, this is worrying a little bit, this culture of early elections. This is not really in line with the aim of democracy. Of course, this is in the frame of law, but this is not really something which can help democracy. There is no doubts that this pre-electoral period was marked by many irregularities, and generally speaking, the misuse of the public funds, and what was many times underlined by opposition, there was no equal access to the media. The whole process and the whole election time was overshadowed by the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and somehow, like in many countries, this topic was so important that people did not have enough time for the election. But I must say that the day of the election, from my perspective and the majority of our colleagues who observed, was smooth, and we did not notice so many irregularities. I know, and Petra was speaking about this, but out of these 20 people, 25, only few reported irregularities. So from this perspective, I must say it was democratic choice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and sorry for not warning you in your first term to also address this report. Now we continue with the list of speakers, and prochain orateur, Monsieur Christian Klinger de la France, au nom du groupe PPE.
Monsieur le Président, mes chers collègues, le 3 avril dernier, des élections présidentielles ont eu lieu effectivement en Serbie. J'ai eu l'honneur de faire partie de la commission ad hoc de notre Assemblée qui s'est rendue, et je félicite notre collègue Alexander Juncko pour son rapport qui rend parfaitement compte du déroulement de ces élections. Les précédentes élections législatives, en juin 2020, avaient été boycottées par la majeure partie de l'opposition. Cette fois, les élections d'avril dernier ont permis la participation de l'ensemble des partis. Les électeurs se sont ainsi vus proposer une offre politique diversifiée. Avec un taux de 59%, la participation est toutefois restée assez faible, et il apparaît nécessaire que les responsables politiques s'efforcent de la renforcer à l'avenir. Mais ce constat-là n'est pas propre à la Serbie. Au regard des élections législatives qui se sont tenues hier en France, nous n'échapperons pas non plus à un débat sur la participation des citoyens à notre démocratie. Pour en revenir à la Serbie, si l'on a pu conclure que les libertés fondamentales ont été respectées dans une large mesure le jour du scrutin, des difficultés de longue date demeurent. La législation actuelle n'offre pas de garanties suffisantes pour éviter l'utilisation des ressources publiques au profit d'un candidat. Des fonctionnaires ont manifestement utilisé de manière abusive les ressources publiques pour soutenir les candidats de la coalition au pouvoir. Plusieurs signalements crédibles attestent également de pressions exercées sur des fonctionnaires pour qu'ils la soutiennent. En outre, la plupart des représentants de l'opposition ont pointé le manque de possibilités de présenter leur point de vue dans les médias audiovisuels, publics et privés. Les journalistes sont parfois obligés de s'auto-censurer quand ils ne font pas l'objet de pression. Enfin, les règles de financement des campagnes ne sont pas totalement transparentes. Le montant des dépenses de campagne ne fait pas l'objet de contrôles suffisants pour s'assurer que le plafond est respecté. Or, il ne faut pas oublier que la corruption reste un des majeurs problèmes en Serbie. Les autorités au pouvoir devront impérativement lutter contre ce phénomène pour garantir l'équité dans les scrutins à venir. Après 10 ans au pouvoir, les défis sont nombreux pour le président élu, Aleksandar Vučić. Outre la lutte contre la corruption, il devra proposer des réformes relatives à la liberté des médias et à l'indépendance de la justice pour éviter un nouveau boycott des institutions démocratiques par l'opposition. Le Conseil de l'Europe devra aider la Serbie à progresser sur ces sujets. Enfin, si la Serbie est un pays candidat à l'adhésion de l'Union européenne, elle n'en reste pas moins attachée à la Russie, avec laquelle elle entretient une relation historique. Il ne faudrait pas que les tensions entre la Russie et l'Union européenne, liées à la guerre en Ukraine, compliquent ou retardent les avancées démocratiques en Serbie. C'est évidemment un point de vue d'attention pour nous tous.
Merci, Christian. Next speaker on our list is Mr. Salt Nemeth from Hungary. Salt, you have the floor.
First of all, relating Serbia, I would like to congratulate the free, democratic and successful elections of our Serbian colleagues. And I would like to welcome the Speaker of the Serbian Parliament among us, Mr. Dačić, and I would like to welcome also Elvira Kovač, the head of the Serbian delegation. And congratulations to you, Mr. Počaj, for both reports. Dear colleagues, we all are now obsessed with the tragedy of the war, and I think it is right to do so. 100 plus, some say even 1,000 dead a day. What is really compelling and really shocking to all of us, not to speak about the geo-economic consequences for Europe and the globe, which are dire. Inflation, energy prices, food prices, and all these consequences supplement the post-COVID situation of us, which was also extremely challenging. The values of peace, stability, and justice are core values we are again crying for, again, after long decades of tranquility and progress. Now we have to re-evaluate, colleagues, what is important and what is less important to us in the Council of Europe as well. The fourth summit, I believe, is coming just in the right moment in front of us, and we need to exploit the possibility in this new possibility in front of us. A new world order is developing. We all see that the Helsinki world is finished, but many of us are aware that we do not want Yalta either coming back. We do not want the Soviet Union to return. Dear colleagues, hope that sooner rather than later, instead of generals, diplomats will take over the management of the present situation. And I hope that the Council of Europe, as it played a crucial and central role in 30 years ago developments of democratic transition in Central and Eastern Europe will play an equally important role in creating the new political architecture of Europe. European unity must be preserved and reinforced with the help of this fourth summit coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zalt. Next on my list is Mr. Rafael Husseinov from Azerbaijan. Rafael, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, as I reflect on this progress report, I would like to reflect not only on the work done and the achievements gained since the last past session, but also on how the Assembly has passed the previous period of the pandemic to assess the difficult and tasting parts that we have left behind. Because today, for the first time in the past 2 years, we are all working at full capacity, visually, without masks, in a pre-pandemic mode. This marks the end of an unprecedented period in the history of the world and the Council of Europe. It is necessary to evaluate each experienced period and the past stage. A simple disease has demonstrated that it can be stronger than democracy and human rights and can easily bend everyone to its will. They said that not only going out into the streets and squares should be banned, but also leaving the house should be with special permission at certain hours. We all agreed, and never occurred to anyone to remind that we had the freedom of assembly. They banned mass events, cancelled flights from country to country. Everyone agreed without discussion or protest. The pandemic, with its amazing power, was able to prevent drug trafficking, which has always been very difficult to prevent. It was able to prevent the advance of terrorism, to temporarily stop the attempts of the invaders to occupy foreign territories, to silence the separatists. It proved to everyone that there is no greater value in the world than human life. It defeated many. Nevertheless, there was one disease that it could not overcome: double standards. Even when humanity was threatened with death, this evil was not abandoned. Double standards have once again come to the fore in addressing the issue of vaccine distribution. I suppose it's very significant to learn from the past. Let us draw a conclusion from the experience of the last 2 years and take a more consistent, more principled position in the struggle for at least 2 truths. Let us be more united, resolute, and uncompromising in the fight against those who lead people to deprivation, suffering, death, and disaster. And most importantly, let's be a little more intolerant of double standards, that we have managed to be stronger than even a pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Next on our list is Mr. Ahmet Yildiz from Turkey. Ahmet, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I also would like to thank our rapporteur, our colleague, Mr. Poiche, for the report, which summarized the work of Bureau and Standing Committee till now, especially in Dublin, Ireland. As is the case till now, Turkish delegation will continue to support the activities of the Assembly and the committees. I am proud that Turkish delegation from whole political spectrum is among the best in attending and contributing to the activities of the Assembly, and they will continue to do so. With this understanding, I am sorry about the postponement of the Monitoring Committee meeting in Turkey, but now we extended an invitation to the Social Affairs Committee, headed by Ms. Selin Sayek-Böker, to make its next meeting in Izmir, which is the lovely Aegean city in Turkey. Dear colleagues, we are at a time to prioritize the common challenges and to design the common answers to these challenges, instead of prevailing the cynical approaches on disputes among countries. Of course, the foremost challenge, the worst challenge, is now the war on Ukraine and its repercussions and consequences. I hope in the future we will continue, and in the debate also on Black Sea, we will make contributions to this. About the summer, of course, summit, I think sooner is better. Usually all other organizations have periodical summits, regular summits, but we don't have. It has been long been overdue. I remember in 2016 we had 3 summits in Turkey, Istanbul, and in 2015 G20 in Antalya. We have a good experience on summits. I think everybody understands what I mean. Of course, there should be no specific reason for organizing summits. I think we should think about making it periodical. I congratulate Serbian authorities and Serbian people for the smooth elections. I hope the elections in Bosnia and Herzegovina also will continue, will be held smoothly, contributing to the stability, further stability in the country. With this understanding, I thank the rapporteur, Mr. Poice, again, with congratulations to Serbian authorities.
Thank you, Mr. Yildiz. I now give the floor to Mr. Dacic, Serbia.
Poštovani predsjedavajući, dragi Aleksandre, poštovane kolege, drago mi je da mogu da vam se obratim u ime Republike Srbije kao predsjednik Narodne skupštine. Najprije želim da zahvalim svim kolegama, članovima Parlamentarne skupštine koji su učestvovali u radu posmatračke misije i imali smo odlučnu saradnju kako u okviru naših nadležnosti Narodne skupštine, tako i svih drugih državnih institucija koje su bile uključene u izborni proces. Želim da naglasim da smo zadovoljni što je za organizaciju i tok naših izbora vladalo veliko interesovanje naših kolega iz inostranstva, jer to je bila i naša želja da u celom svom toku imamo potpuno otvoren izborni proces, izložen stalnoj kontroli kako domaćih, tako i međunarodnih posmatrača i da u krajnjem cilju dobijemo potvrdu da je bio fer, demokratski i da je omogućio našim građanima da jasno iskažu svoju izbornu volju. Ja sam uveren da smo u tome uspeli i da još jednom iza sebe imamo izbore koji su sprovedeni po najvišim demokratskim standardima i što je najvažnije, da su iz njih proistekle institucije sa punim demokratskim legitimitetom koje odražavaju istinsku političku volju naših građana. Želim da vas podsjetim da smo pored misije Parlamentarne skupštine Saveta Evrope imali u svojstvu posmatrača i kolege iz OEBS-a i Evropskog parlamenta, što bez sumnje govori o otvorenosti našeg izbornog procesa prema najvažnijim međunarodnim organizacijama koje se bave demokratijom i građanskim pravima i slobodama. Izbori su u svakoj zemlji najveći ispit demokratije i ja sam uveren da je Srbija i sada položila taj ispit sa visokom ocenom. Vama je, siguran sam, poznato, a to je bez sumnje i važan deo ovog izveštaja, da su parlamentarni i predsjednički izbori u Srbiji održani 3. aprila imali važnu predistoriju. Govorimo o međustranačkom dijalogu koji je prethodio ovim izborima i u okviru kojeg su svi relevantni politički činioci, partije, pokreti i pojedinci u demokratskoj atmosferi tražili rešenja kojima ćemo još više unaprediti demokratičnost našeg izbornog procesa. Podsjetit ću vas da ovo nije prvi put da imamo tu praksu, da smo to imali i oči parlamentarnih izbora 2020. godine. U oba procesa važnu ulogu imala je delegacija Evropskog parlamenta koja je uz Narodnu skupštinu bila kofacilitator ovog dijaloga. Na kraju, uveren sam da je u ovom izbornom procesu Srbija pokazala veoma visok nivo demokratskih standarda, potpunu otvorenost izbornog procesa i uslove koji su omogućili da se predstave sve političke partije. Uveren sam da su građani i ovoga puta imali priliku da u mirnoj atmosferi, sagledavajući veoma široki spektar političkih ideja i koncepata, bez pritisaka i uz punu zaštitu izbornog prava, daju glas onima za koje smatraju da treba da ih predstavljaju u najvišim državnim institucijama. Mi želimo da i dalje brinemo o evoluciji našeg izbornog sistema i spremni smo da u tom smislu imamo punu saradnju sa međunarodnim organizacijama, a pre svega sa Savetom Evrope i Parlamentarnom skupštinom kao neupitnim autoritetom za zaštitu i unapređenje demokratskih tokova. Hvala vam.
Thank you very much. I give now the floor to Mr. Ruben Rubenjan from Armenia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, in April last year, this Assembly held discussions on an urgent issue of the Armenian prisoners of war and other captives which found themselves in Azerbaijani captivity after the war. The debates were very emotional. Members of the Assembly emphasized the imperativeness of the immediate and unconditional release of all the prisoners and their repatriation, and stressed that the unlawful detention of these people constitutes a flagrant violation of the international humanitarian law by the Azerbaijani authorities. Afterwards, the Assembly adopted a resolution on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and the humanitarian consequences of the recent war, expressing its utmost concern about the fate of the Armenian captives, on the conditions of their detention, and called on the Azerbaijani authorities to release all remaining captives and return them to Armenia without delay. Almost 2 years have passed since the signing of the trilateral statement on the ceasefire, by which Azerbaijan undertook the obligation to return all the prisoners of war, hostages and other detainees, but up until this day, there are still 38 captives confirmed by Azerbaijan, 3 of whom are civilians. Azerbaijan refuses to return the remaining prisoners of war and is using them as hostages, treating them as bargaining chips to receive further political gains. Many of the prisoners have undergone false and speedy criminal trials on contrived charges. The inhuman and degrading treatment and the massive human rights violations towards these people have been documented by many international organizations and NGOs. The Human Rights Commissioner, Madam Mijatovic, has also addressed the issue and expressed concern in her memorandum. Colleagues, I use this opportunity once again to call you all to unite all the efforts to solve the urgent humanitarian issue of repatriation of the Armenian prisoners of war. This is a humanitarian issue. This is not a political issue. The problem is very simple. The Armenian prisoners of war and other captives should have been released, but they are not. And they are at risk of being killed every day. The problem is that this very Assembly adopted a resolution and called on Azerbaijan to release all these people last year, but they seem not to care. And the problem is that instead of following up on this issue, you are again most probably going to focus on the heated debate between Armenian and Azerbaijani delegations, which I suspect may follow, and the real issue will be unsolved. I have no problem with the Azerbaijani delegation. I have a problem with the fact that at least 38 people are held as hostages in a country that hates them institutionally. Everyone should have a problem with this, and I hope you will have a problem with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I go now to the last speaker in this debate, Mrs. Elvira Kovac, also from Serbia.
Thank you, distinguished chair, dear colleagues. It is valuable that we meet, talk, and use our experiences to try to improve our institutions and our procedures. As you know, regular presidential elections, as well as the early parliamentary elections and local elections in 13 local self-government units and in 1 city municipality were held on 3rd April this year in Serbia. The Republic Electoral Commission is in charge of conducting the election and announcing the final results. Electoral activities at the national level parliamentary elections carried out by the Republic Electoral Commission have not been finished yet from the legal aspect. On 4th February this year, the National Assembly passed new electoral laws, the law on the election of members of parliament, the law on the election of President of the Republic, and the law on local elections, actually amended laws. These laws are the result of 2 inter-party dialogue mentioned by the Speaker, carried out simultaneously. One of them was facilitated by representatives of the European Parliament, while the other was held without their participation. Besides some legal solutions resulting from the agreements reached within the 2 inter-party dialogues, the new laws also include some provisions aimed at following up on the recommendations put forward of the OSCE ODIHR observation missions reports. In accordance with one of the priority recommendations, the new electoral laws extend the general deadline for filing complaints from 24 to 72 hours, and the deadlines for taking decisions on the complaints and appeals have been extended from 48 also to 72 hours. The deadline for lodging an appeal against the decision on complaints has also been extended from 48 to 72 hours. So, bearing in mind that the new law on the election of members of parliament was passed on February this year, extending the deadlines for conducting election activities, and that voting has been repeated at certain polling stations, the Republic Electoral Commission has not yet announced the final results of the parliamentary elections. Under the Constitution, the first session of the National Assembly of the Republic of Serbia in this new term of office must be held no later than 30 days from the day of announcement of final election results. Therefore, we expect to work in full capacity during the summer. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kovacs. Then Mr. Goncharenko, who is the next speaker on the list, came to see me. He declared to me his love, so I gave him 2 minutes. That's what he wanted to have. And you are finally the very last speaker.
Chair, thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you for the possibility to speak. And secondly, I would like to address to all of you, my dear colleagues, I just want to remind you that our organization, Council of Europe, was created as a fortress for democracy, human rights, rule of law, for the general values which unites all of us and all civilized people on the continent. And in this meaning, Strasbourg has been the heart of Europe. I'm saying has been, because I think now Mariupol is the heart of Europe. And like this palace was the fortress which was defending these values, now Azovstal is the fortress in which these values were defended, not just by speeches, not just by resolutions, but by people with weapons in their hands. These people saved Europe. These people saved us from terrible consequences. And last time we were here in April, I spoke about these people, and all of you stood up in their support. Now, all of them, many of them, some of them died, but many of them now are in Russian prison. Now some of them are tortured by Russians. And I think it's very important, and I address to all of you, to all your governments, to our organization, to help to save these people. I just want not to speak about some anonymous people. I want to name some of them. It's Denis Prokopenko, commander of Azov regiment. He is a teacher of English language, and he was fighting for our values. Dmitro Kazatsky, photographer, who won many prizes as photographer. Sergei Volinsky, Marine. He is married, he has a son, and I know him personally. Svetoslav Palomar, deputy commander of Azov the regiment, he has a son. Katya Ptashka, doctor, she is in prison. Victoria Bidna, doctor, mother of 4-year-old daughter. So, I just want to ask all of you to help us to save them. Save our souls. And you know, this signal source, save our souls. Today, by saving their souls, we will save our soul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goncharenko. I now have to close the debate. You know that if you want to send your speech to the table office, you have to do that within 4 hours after the debate. But I give the floor, I give the floor to Mr. Poche. You get 3 minutes. It's enough for you. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. After what Mr. Goncharenko just said, this is very difficult to go back to the normal procedure. I remember when being in Kiev, there is a wall with the picture names of people killed, but killed for the last 7 or 8 years. And it was hundreds of people. And when we went there, I've been told by one of the Ukrainian colleagues, you will see there is many places because this is the big wall. And I didn't believe what he said, that he is expecting the war and many other names to be put it. Now this is truth, and this is the biggest tragedy that we are going through. Mr. Little-Granger, he expressed his worries about fourth summit, and partially I must agree, because the third summit, 2005 in Warsaw, also raised many expectations, and this organization did not change so much. So I hope that we are going to be invited to this procedure. Unfortunately, today at the Bureau's meeting, I did not hear from our Secretary General how she wants to include us as the Parliamentary Assembly to this process, because this is this fourth summit, this is not 100% our task. This is the government's, head of states. But I would like to know very soon how we can contribute, because we were asked. I want to have the answer how. Et la dernière chose, je veux rebondir à ce que Monsieur Jacques Maire, il a dit de la société russe. Et il a tout à fait raison. Nous avons parlé aujourd'hui à Madame Karamurza, la femme de la personne qui est maintenant emprisonnée. Mais je dois souligner ce qu'elle nous a dit pendant notre rencontre. Il y a beaucoup de gens en Russie qui pensent comme M. Karamurza, et il nous faut votre aide, c'est-à-dire de notre organisation, pour être fort, pour débattre, combattre le régime de Poutine. Et ça, il faut que nous avons ça en tête. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much. I close now this debate, but I have to give some informations and some decisions have to be taken. The Bureau has proposed references to committees for ratification by the Assembly. They are set out in document 15550 and in the addendum number 1. Is there any objection to the proposed references to the committees? I don't see, so I can go on. I now propose that the other decisions in the progress report document I just mentioned be ratified. Are there any objections? I don't see. Then I go to the next one. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting this afternoon at 3 p.m. with the agenda which was already approved this morning. The sitting is adjourned and I wish you a good lunch. Thank you very much.